Thank you so much for joining us for All Angles. I'm Dion Jackson Miller. In today's program, concerns about the collapse of a staircase at an apartment complex in St. Andrew and the wider issue of maintenance of government infrastructure. We are going to be hearing from the president of the Incorporated Master Builders Association of Jamaica, Richard Mullings, along with civil engineer and chairman of the civil division of the Jamaica Institution of Engineers, Dr. Leighton Ellis. Before that, though, I caught up with opposition spokesperson on finance, Julian Robinson, to respond to Prime Minister Andrew Holness, who yesterday delivered what his office billed as a major economic policy statement. Thank you so much for talking to us, Mr. Robinson. So yesterday, the Prime Minister delivered what the Office of the Prime Minister billed as a major economic policy speech. First of all, your general reaction?
Well, I didn't hear anything new from the Prime Minister. What I heard was a repeat and a rehash of initiatives that have been announced over a 9-year period, initiatives that have not been successfully implemented, and which the Prime Minister has now brought as a major policy initiative. From my perspective, this government has been in power for 2 months shy of 9 years. They have had an opportunity to do the things that the Prime Minister outlined yesterday. So it's not credible from my perspective to come on the eve of a general election with 9 months due to an election to now present this great pivot. Did he not know that growth was an issue? The reality is that growth has been an issue for a very long time, but very little focus has been placed on growing the economy and being inclusive in that growth. So to come now on the eve of an election to present things which you have presented before doesn't inspire any confidence from my perspective, and it's not credible for me.
Couple of things though. First of all, what the Prime Minister said, and the former Finance Minister Nigel Clark said that at several points as well, that the aim was to achieve stability, and their position is that now stability has been achieved in the economy, then the country can now build on that with growth. That sounds logical.
Yeah, but I don't think it needs to be a mutually exclusive objectives. I think the issue of stability has been achieved by bringing the debt down to manageable levels. But while you're doing that, you need to put in place the infrastructure to grow the economy. I don't think you have to wait till you get to the end of stability to start to grow. I mean, the reality is we've been on a trajectory for the last 10 years in a positive way. Started with the PMP administration in 2012. It has continued with this administration. We're going to get down to 70% debt to GDP in a couple of years. But really, there hasn't been much focus in the last number of years on how do you grow the economy. We've had anemic growth, not just in this administration, but since independence, 1% to 2% on average. So the question for me is, why has the Prime Minister waited 9 years to now say, these are these initiatives to grow the economy? Why this great pivot now?
But you mentioned, well, the way you put it is that he, spoke of initiatives that rehashed, to use your words, over the past 9 years. Having said that, though, isn't it worthwhile to take a look at all these various announcements, various initiatives, various projects, put them together, which is what the Prime Minister and his administration now seem to be doing, put them together in a comprehensive plan and say, as he did yesterday, the time for talk is over. We're now pushing forward on action and implementation. That can't be a bad thing.
It may not be bad, but let me just use one example. Let's take energy and the cost of energy. And let's look at the track record of this government in terms of how it has managed the energy portfolio. It's taken 8.5 years for this administration to put out a request for proposal for adding renewable energy to the grid. 8.5 years. So when you come now, you talk about, everybody knows we need to reduce the cost of energy if we're going to be competitive as an economy to ease the pressure on consumers. But it takes you 8.5 years to put out a request for proposal. So to tell me now after 9 years that you have a major platform of how you're going to reduce the cost of energy, you're going to do waste energy, when you have had a task force in place for how long to convert Riverton into something, nothing has happened. Tell us about that. I'm simply saying that what the Prime Minister came with, you might call it packaging, but he needs to tell us what has happened with those initiatives over the past 9 years, where the issues have been, what have been the obstacles to full implementation. But to present this as a great pivot is not credible in my perspective.
At the same time, though, you mentioned the election, which we now expect sometime in less than a year. But it can't be, though, that the administration stops governing, because it's as if everything that's announced nowadays is, oh, it's a precursor to election, it's because you're in the lead up to election, but the government still has to govern, and that includes trying to grow the economy. So that can't be a reason for criticism of the plan.
But I would say, the way this was positioned, right? It was positioned as some grand announcement. I've been trying to find out what that grand announcement is. I haven't heard it. I don't know if you have heard what the grand announcement is. The timing, I can't read the Prime Minister's mind about timing, right? But it seemed more akin to what you would have in a budget presentation. Now, he obviously has the right to speak at any point in time, right? But I'm just saying, when I look at the landscape on the eve of an election, right, it seems to me a presentation to ask for more time to get these things done. That's how I read it.
You mentioned earlier that this administration is not the only one that has had the growth problem. We've
Correct.
had that with successive administrations. But that really puts us in a position that, okay, so far this administration hasn't achieved significant growth, but the PNP in previous administrations didn't either. So we don't really have any expectation that if you're elected, you can do any better in any case. For the public,
Right.
not 6 or one half does than the other.
No, what I would say, I would reference my own presentations in the budget debate for the last 3 years, and I have outlined very specific things that I believe are necessary to deal with the growth problem. Jamaica is stuck in what is called the middle income trap, defined by the World Bank. Middle income countries, we're about $7,000 US per capita GDP, but difficult to grow. And our problem relates to low productivity, low wages, and low growth. Now, there are a number of ways you have to address it. Fundamentally, you have to address the low educational outcomes that exist, particularly at the early childhood and primary levels. And specifically, we have to ensure that children leave basic school and primary school being able to read and write. Literacy and numeracy are critical. In the entire educational reform, that has to be important. There are sectors that I believe we need to place more emphasis on. In agriculture, I think there are a lot of opportunities with the linkages to tourism to have greater growth, that you can reduce your imports, but farmers need technical support. They need easier access to financing. There's more that you need to do on irrigation. How we position ourselves as a logistics-centered economy is something that I believe we have not fully exploited, and where there are greater opportunities for growth. In our cultural and creative industries, other ways. So we have put forward specific proposals as to how we can move beyond the 1% and the 2% growth and get to 3% and 4% and 5%, and being inclusive where you can lift living standards. So I have acknowledged the growth issue is not specific to this administration. If you look at since independence, our average growth rate has just been over 1%. We have had peaks and we have had drops.
Everything you said, though, literally, the Prime Minister also said yesterday. He referenced the Pattison report, the importance of basic literacy and numeracy. He went on to speak about skills
we've been
building.
talking about these things long before. So just to be clear, and we're not saying these things because he said it. We've been saying these things for the last 3 years.
But that actually is exactly the point I'm making. He spoke about skills building, tech skills, agricultural linkages with tourism, logistics. In other words, you're all saying the same thing, but the public is stuck in the middle and seeing us paddling in place, treading water. No,
well, we have outlined how we believe we can get Jamaica.
Understood, but it's still ideas and proposals.
Yeah, you have to get
with no track record.
Huh?
With no track record.
I wouldn't say no track record. Track record, I think perspective is important. When we came in 2012, we had a crisis. We were pretty much on the verge of bankruptcy. And so clearly the focus there was to reestablish our credibility in the international capital markets and bring down our debt. So that was the principal focus then, and that has continued. But I think, the reality now is that, and I think we should have shifted that focus, not just now, but a couple of years ago, is to move to how you can grow the economy. And I'm simply saying that after 9 years, it is not credible for the Prime Minister to come and just present these things as if he's just come as an opening batsman and he's facing the first ball of the match.
He announced what he called another monitoring committee, not economic monitoring committee, but an efficiency program monitoring committee.
I would like to hear details on that. I'm not sure what it means. Yes, we understand that government has bureaucracy, there's red tape, but what is the committee going to do specifically? Is it going to do a business process re-engineering type activity to look at how many times you have to interact with an agency to get an outcome? I don't know. I would like to understand some more specifics of what that committee would do. It sounds very similar to what President-elect Trump has spoken about with Elon Musk of this government efficiency thing, but we need to get details.
Okay, now we're going to go to a short break. When we come back, we'll hear a little bit more from the opposition spokesperson. After that, we're going to be talking about this issue of the collapsed staircase. Stay tuned.